And then I really enjoyed myself by using the mop brush to flick paint splatters all over the painting. Hi, it's Anna Mason. Welcome to this episode of Nature Studio TV, here to help you become the artist you want to be. In this mini class, I'm going to show you how I painted this vibrant Freesia in a pretty loose line and wash style using watercolor and a waxy grey coloured pencil to create a bold outline. It's a quick and satisfying style to work in, so let's take a look. I worked from a photo and began by making a freehand pencil drawing. I used a rough grid method of dividing my photo and paper into large squares, 3 across and 4 up, but only marking the edges of the paper instead of drawing in grid lines. Once I was happy with the drawing, I went over my pencil lines with thick black waxy coloured pencil. Not only does this give the painting a graphic look, but the waxy pencil also helps form a boundary between the petals and stamens, etc., which will help stop the wet watercolour paint from merging in those areas. Now it was time to go in with my paint. I began by laying down a watery pale layer of each different colour within the flower. I used a size 00 mop brush, and to help me loosen up, I tried to make sure that I held the brush quite far up the handle so that I had more movement in my wrist. I was working with the broadest shapes of colour and not worrying about being too precise about where I placed them. The colours all stayed separate despite all being wet because of that pencil work to separate them. Letting that completely dry, I then went in with the darkest tones within the flower with a rich, really dark and quite thick purple mix. Again, holding the brush higher up helped me to be looser and less precise about where exactly I placed these, focusing more on the general shapes and angles. Next, I mixed a really vibrant pink purple to work on the darker midtones, looking to recreate the textures I could see in these pink purple areas with some stippling with my brush in places. Then I placed some fairly watery purple paint to the lighter mid-tone areas, but continuing to leave plenty of gaps to the now dry initial layer so that there's lots of contrast to the flower. In fact, more contrast than I see in the reference photo, as it's a dramatic high contrast look I'm looking for this piece. I could see that in many areas I'd like to darken up some more, so instead of waiting for the paint to dry, I used the darker purple mix to drop in some more colour to the wet paper in a few places. I couldn't completely control where it goes, but I embraced that and focused on enjoying the marks the wet paint makes on the paper, so it became really fun. Next, I went down to my size 5 spotter brush so that I could make smaller shapes and be a bit more controlled about where I placed the paint. But note that I was still holding it high up so that I could maintain a fluidity to my brush strokes. I added in some permanent rose to this colour to add in a vibrant reddish quality to the pink. Then I looked to darken up the lightest tones in quite a lot of places with a watery purple wash that contains some brown to mute it down and make it less vibrant. Next, I used similar pale mixes to start to make tonal adjustments and darken up elsewhere within the flower that I could see needed it. Letting the petals dry off now, I added the darkest greens to the stem and buds. Then I applied a more yellow-green mix to the mid-tones and worked to add in some more muted pale grey-green and some neat yellow in a few areas. And then I darkened up the darkest tones some more before adding a few more details to the anthers once the paper was dry. I then made a round of tonal adjustments, starting by using the same watery mixes to darken a little some of the lighter areas that now look too light. And then working on the darker midtones some more, I started to place in a few line details too, before I darkened up the greens some more and continued to look for areas that I felt needed to be darker. At this point, I decided to reinforce the pencil work so that I could see it more clearly. That added more dark to the flower, which made it easier to see which areas I felt I wanted to darken further, and I did that now, looking back and forth to the reference photo to check. Next, I decided to lift the colour by using some neat opera rose to add more gorgeous, intense vibrancy, before making some more adjustments, including adding more yellow to the stems. Finally, I added some fun embellishments in the form of pencil markings to bring out the paper texture. And then I really enjoyed myself by using the mop brush to flick paint splatters all over the painting. And with a couple of extra details, this illustrative Freesia was finished. A full-length video class of this Freesia, along with hundreds of other nature-themed classes, are available now with Nature Studio membership. If you've enjoyed this mini class, please subscribe to Nature Studio TV, then pop over to naturestudio.com where you can sign up for a set of free classes and find a whole heap of resources to help you capture the beauty of nature on your paper. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.